Welcome to the Real Situation podcast with Jason Campbell. And I'm thrilled to announce my guest today. We have Louis Pisano on the podcast here, and Louis is joining us from Paris. Louis,
No,
welcome.
actually, I'm in the south of France.
Okay, Louis is in the south of France, but he is in the country of France. Thank you for joining us today, Louis. And okay, we have a lot to get into, so I will not waste a minute. But firstly, let's give a little background, Louis, on what I discovered about you out
Oh.
there.
Oh God.
Louis Pisano is an American Paris-based journalist, fashion commentator, and digital creator whose fearless reporting has made him one of the industry's most influential independent voices. After leaving the United States for Europe, Pisano built a reputation in Milan and Paris by challenging fashion's gatekeepers, exposing discrimination, and demanding greater accountability from luxury brands. Combining incisive cultural criticism with sharp wit and a deep knowledge of fashion, his contribution spans Harper's Bazaar, Vogue France, with television appearances on BBC News and Fashion 24. Equally insider and agitator, Pisano uses journalism, commentary, and style to drive conversations about power, representation, and identity. And tons
What
more,
an
but that's
intro. Wow.
that's the condensed version that I'm delivering this morning. So, Louis, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And I got to tell you, as I said, we have quite an overlapping background, but I'll detail some of that as we get into this conversation. But Louis, you're an American-based journalist, commentator in Paris, and all the things. Based in Paris currently, previously in Milan. But take me back, because there is a long tradition of queer Black Americans moving to Europe for myriad of reasons. James Baldwin, of course, is say the benchmark for that migration, for issues surrounding assimilation, race, culture, and all of the things. And I lived in Europe for several years as well. I know why I moved there. I know what the difference is for me in Europe than America. But I want to find out for you. But firstly, take me back to what life was like in America and then how you transplanted to Europe.
I mean, life in America pre-Europe. So I was in university. I got kicked out after one semester. My dad was like, okay, your party boy era is over. You need to do something with your life. Maybe you should like, well, he didn't, it wasn't like you know, a choice. He was like, you're gonna join the military like me. And that
You in the
was
military.
I was in the Navy.
Work.
Yeah,
Work.
I was in IT in the Navy. So yeah, I joined the Navy. I was in IT, so I just got to like fuck around on computers all day, which was great for me. Um, and I got stationed in Italy, so that's how I actually got to Europe in the first place.
So wait, there was like essentially forced enlistment. I mean, considerate of your personality now, at least the bits that I know about it or have seen, you ended up into the military wouldn't seem like a sort of foregone conclusion. Did you fight that direction, or you were like, this could be my freedom?
So part of me was like, okay, I'm just gonna like go with it because I'd always wanted to move to Europe. I wanted to work in fashion. I was like, this could be my entree into like whatever life throws at me. But at the same time, it was still very hard for me having the personality that I have. I'm not very good with authority, and that quickly became a little bit of an issue when I was in the Navy because I was just sort of doing my own thing and kind of like, I just was not the kind of person that you can sort of take and shape to be this sort of like generic sort of military person.
Okay.
I I very much did things my own way. I question people in authority positions, which wasn't really conducive to the military. But at the same time, one of the things that I was doing while I was in the military is that I was stationed in the south of Italy. And every weekend, I would hop on the train and go to Milan and have this whole other life.
But was that always the plan? Was that the plan all along? I'm going to go to Italy, I'm going to be in the military, and I'm going to go AWOL and join fashion.
I wouldn't say it was the plan, but I think that I was saying, okay, I'm at point A. This will give me sort of the knowledge and the experience to get to point B. And then gradually it was just like, you know what? I'm just going to go for it.
Got you. I found I think, a salient quote out there on you, from you. And I want to start with that because I think it informs a lot of the questions that I have to follow. It states, it was from an interview that you did for Mixed. And you say, as a Black queer person, my whole being and moving through this world is fraught with tension. So it doesn't impact my creative process because it's my modus operandi. Break that down for me. I thought you said so much in that quote that informs your output beyond, influence your professional output. But break it down for me as you intended in that quote.
I think for me, I'm used to stress and pressure and friction, like as a child, we moved around a lot. So having to be the new kid and sort of figure out how things worked and figure out how I would, be, I guess, successful in every new place that I was living, I just learned how to sort of go with the flow and become adaptable. Yeah, adapt to new situations.
But I like your use of the word tension because it also seems to speak to the engine that motivates anything counterculture, a contrarian perspective that you have in some instances. It just speaks to a ongoing fight, an ongoing discomfort that informs how you operate in the world and how you show up professionally, possibly.
I'm not afraid to tussle. I'm not afraid of a little bit of a fight. I'm not afraid of trouble, which sometimes finds its way my way. Yeah, it's just that life is full of friction and tension, and I'm used to it, and I don't run away from it.
And you did punctuate that by saying it is my modus operandi. Are you then seek it? Do you run towards it? Do you seek it? Do you court it?
You know what? For a while, I was like, oh, trouble just finds me or whatever. But then I started to realize through, some introspection within myself, and I realized I do chase it.
You do check. And what is the motivation for that? Is it for recognition? Is it for thrill? Is it for, the start of interrogating, like starting to pull the thread to see what may unspool from there?
I think maybe the last one because I feel like the things that cause this sort of friction and this tension, people shy away from it. They don't want to talk about these things in fashion or whatever, I'm working in. But me, I'm interested in the things people don't want to talk about, things people don't want to unpack, things people don't want to deal with. So my natural attraction to those things and not being afraid of the tension as a result of it or the friction as a result of it, is the way I operate.
And what motivates that willingness to go on record? What motivates that sort of fearlessness, and why are you willing to speak when so many others are unwilling to?
Um, I'm not afraid of, like I went through military boot camp. There is not much that scares me or puts fear in my heart,
But you're
Like,
surrounded by so much of it, Louis. You know, one of the things I've not understood in my professional tenure in fashion is the fear, like the fear of giving an honest opinion, the fear of speaking public. And we work in a creative industry, and so everyone is not going to agree on a creative output oftentimes where we're silenced, where you cannot speak candidly about what you thought about a collection, what you thought about what you think, particularly about a collection, but what you think about a creative process. I just not understood why we cannot express an honest opinion, especially when we come from that's our tradition. We come from a space of fashion criticism and not necessarily accepting all that is delivered to us. Why has that been obsoleted?
I think a lot of people in fashion are very insecure of themselves and very insecure of their position in things. And the way that I operate is that, I have probably a delusional amount of self-confidence. Like, oh my God, like if I get blacklisted somewhere, you know what? I'm gonna find another way to do what I want. Like I literally came to Europe and I created this career out of nothing. So if I have to do it again, I know I can do it again.
Well, let's be honest. As Black people, we especially ambitious Black people with a certain amount of access and exposure, we've gotta have that muscle, and we oftentimes exercise it more than we care to. But yes, we always gotta have that giddy up in order because nobody's gonna have that giddy up for us. So we always have to have
Yeah.
it to come.
Well, I'm a very pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of person.
Got you. And you seem to be exercising that out in the world. But Lewis, how do you actually define what you do? Do you consider yourself a journalist, a commentator, an industry insider who refuses to play by the rule? And at what point did you recognize that your voice was becoming influential and that you were shaping the conversation?
Like in calling myself a journalist or a fashion influencer or insider and all of these things, there's always people that will push back on that and be like, "Oh, well, you're not this. You didn't go and study journalism," and they're like, absolutely right. So I just like to say I work.
You work.
You know, I work because they are right in some aspects. I'm not like a professionally, educationally trained journalist and this and that. And I could say, oh, I'm a fashion insider, but people will be like, oh, but you're not an insider, blah, blah, blah. So I just work. I don't have any more pretensions about where I am in this industry, like what I do, what I can do. I've kind of like unlearned that in recent years and I just work. I don't think of myself as more important than I am or things like that because I feel like in this industry people will really gas you up. And once you start to believe that hype, they will tear you down.
Definitely a paradigm. But now let's talk about the Milan years. You're now in Paris, and in many ways, the Milan years are behind you, but those years were seminal in formulating your
Yeah.
identity, or at least your identity in fashion. And while I didn't, I well, as we said at the onset of this conversation, we don't know each other, but I certainly have some information from back in those days about your presence in Milan, working in PR, working in nightlife, and all the things. And I have such strong opinion on Milan and in Italy in general as a Black person. But tell me about your experience and how that was your, let's call it your formal, informal coming out into the industry. How
Yeah.
detail those years.
So basically, when I was in the Navy and I was going to Milan every weekend, I was just finding anybody in fashion on Twitter and following them and tweeting at them and, just sort of building this rapport so that when I arrived to Milan on those like weekends, I would know people at the parties and in the clubs and, sort of building a network from afar. So I was going to all of these parties and all of these like clubs, and I was dressing up, and people were like recognizing me. And I went to Venice Biennale and I was just like crashing parties. And this woman, I knew who she was, our mutual friend, um, was like, "Who are you? I see you in all the parties. All of my friends know you. Like, why don't I know you?" And we spent that night just like going all over Venice with like Amy Sacco of Bungalow 8, and we had just like a crazy night. And she told me when we get back to Milan on Monday, come to my office. So I came to the office. I had no idea what was going on. She put a sheet of paper in front of me and says, I'm doing an event tonight. I want you to make me a list of the 50 most like relevant, cool people in the city. And I did it. And she said, you're hired. So all of a sudden, I was just put on, this door of this like incredibly influential and like big fashion nightlife party in Milan. And then from there, I was doing like events for luxury brands and just meeting everybody. And it just kind of snowballed from there. And I would say that really gave me a view of really like being inside fashion and not just, going to the parties and just being on the outside, but I was like inside like the machine.
Yes. And what was the discovery being in that machine for the first time in one of the, one of the fashion capitals with the notable brands and all the things.
Well, I found out that there was a lot of racism, there was a lot of just mess going on all around. And sort of being thrust into this world, I was just like, why aren't we talking? Why aren't people talking about these things? I remember the first sort of like moment of tension I had because this person I was working for was also in the Dolce Gabbana machine, working in their PR department. And I had tweeted something or made a Facebook post about Dolce and Gabbana's like tax evasion court case. And she turned around from her chair and looked at me and was like, why are you posting this? You need to delete this right now. And I'm like, but this is news that's going on. Like, I'm interested in the case. These are, two of the most famous fashion designers in the world that might be committing tax evasion. I find the case and the legal ramifications of it interesting. And she's like, you cannot talk about this case if you're going to work in this office. And it was like in that moment, I was just like, huh? It was like so bizarre for me because it was something I was interested in. And it was sort of like I had to choose between something I was naturally curious about and not like in a malicious way and like this like nice job that gave me access to everything.
Right. And I'm sure that was not the only example you've had of a situation like that where you felt that there was a valid story to tell, but the powers that be are not allowing you to tell that story because they're protecting relationships and all the things. But okay, so let's accelerate then to this, the progressive identity in fashion. And so much happened around the 2020 time where you were involved as well, and your voice became quite prominent. But what were the ramifications of then wanting to speak and being having your wings clipped from communicating that which you wanted to say? What transpired from that?
Well, after I stopped working for this person, I don't know. I was feeling really sort of disgusted by everything I had seen, everything I heard. And in that moment, like 2019, I want to say, I was like fully in the mindset of like, okay, I'm done with fashion. I'm going to go back to the States. I'm just going to like, I guess, trauma dump all of this stuff that I know about and I haven't been able to talk about. And that's gonna be it. Like I'm gonna just like press my like nuclear button on myself, and you know what? No one's ever gonna want to work with me on this. And it just so happened that sort of spilling the tea on all these like Italian brands being racist coincided with Black Lives Matter. So all of a sudden it went from being like a bad thing to all of a sudden I'm like a big asset.
Right. And here's the deal, Louis. Neither of our profiles and personality deals with being cagey. So I have no problems with speaking about the personalities that we're talking here. And we're speaking about, my very long standing friend Natasha Slater, who you had worked for at the time. And what comes to mind in this conversation is, um, do you think of or treat someone differently based on a relationship, a legacy relationship, let's say you have with that individual, having more information on that individual or that subject, does that impact the way that you approach the coverage of them? And that's the reason why I bring that up is because any a commentary from you in the raw way that you deliver it and unapologetically, regardless of who it is. I don't think anyone should be shielded or sheltered from an experience that you had with him or her. You should be able to detail and express that in any way that you feel fit. But however, on the flip side of that, do you view those personalities that may find themselves in the spotlight in a negative light? Do you view those personalities differently because you have more information about their background, their history, and you have just more intimate interaction with them? Does that color or inform your how you approach them? So, for example, from whence you came as a young, acolyte journalist in this industry to being more seasoned, having some bumps and so forth in the road along the way, and at a different, more mature point in your life, have you augmented the way that you approach your coverage? Is maybe another way to ask that question.
I would say that I'm a little bit more rigorous in the way that I do like fact checking. And also if I have like a pre-existing relationship with people or we're like close, I do have a conversation to see like, okay, like I know about this, I have this story, like what is going on with it? And from that conversation, I decide how I'm going to cover it.
So, in fact, being that you can gather more information from that individual because you have a more intimate relationship with them. That gives you more information to maybe draw a different conclusion or potentially be gentler or harder on the subject.
No, I wouldn't say it's about being more gentle or being harder. It's just I am not just going to spring a story. Well, I'm no longer going to spring a story on somebody that I know. I'd rather have, okay, a conversation, be like, what is the truth? What is going on with this? How are you dealing with it? Like, what is going on? Rather than just like tweet it all out. Like, I've been there, done that, like, really regret it. Um, yeah. But at the
Right.
same time, if the situation warrants it, like, if it's something that's really, really, like, really bad, and they were involved in it, like, I'm sorry, but you should have made better decisions. I know it sounds really harsh to say. I just dealt with this situation with someone, and actually, it had to deal with a party that took place a few days ago during Grand Prix, but it was like last year's. So there is this liquor brand, this sake brand that is founded by this Swiss like heir, and every fashion person loves to go to this party and lots of fashion brands collaborate with this person, but not a lot of people know that this person went to jail in Switzerland for assaulting a child, like a girl.
Yeah. Okay. And have you carry on.
And I covered it last year, and part of like my coverage of it, I shared out some pictures from the party, and in one of the pictures from the party happened to be someone that I was like a good friend with at the time, and they were really, really upset that I would share out a picture of them at this party, but the picture was like on Vogue, you know, um, and I had to make a decision at that point because I understood that like this person pretty much wanted me to like remove that like slide. But I was like, you were there. You were there at this event. This slide isn't meant to call you out personally. It's just to show the access that this person has and how they're able to use fashion people to rehabilitate their image.
Right. And you've stayed on that theme. That theme has been a pervasive one for you in your reporting. And while we're speaking about some of those subjects, a couple of them that has percolated over the last few years has been Ricardo Tisci and also Alexander Wang. You have been very, very, very vocal about their alleged egregious activities out there in culture. So you've really stayed on message in how you interrogate these egregious stories or this bad behavior in fashion. But again, why do you think that so many people are unwilling to call some of the most egregious conduct in fashion their mum's the word? Is it just about being able to sit at the table, or is it about really this is a very small industry, so one's livelihood can be easily threatened, particularly when so much of it is like socially engineered, is about your proximity to whomever the next powerful person, to a decision maker, really impacts your how you make your money. Is it just a case of the smallness, the size of the industry, that why people are not speaking about some of the most heinous alleged acts that we hear about out there?
Yeah, it's that. And also that a lot of people in the industry are also, I don't want to say that they're doing the same kind of things that he did, but they are in the same environments where these things occur.
Okay. So they are culpable by association.
Not that they're culpable by association, but there are a lot of people, there are a lot of gay men in fashion, because I've had conversations with them, that don't really think there's anything wrong with this Ricardo Tisci situation. They think that, the victim is lying, or, even when I was tweeting about it, somebody tweeted, and I had a similar tweet from somebody during the Alexander Wang situation as well. But somebody said, a long time ago, gay men used to just say thank you for the free drugs and shut up.
So in there's a cultural shift that's taking place, but those bad behaviors, the record still stands. That information is still out there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's a cultural shift, but it's kind of just looked on as this is the way gay men party.
But
There are
what's the end goal for you? Oh, and I also read somewhere where you said that your essentially your platform, your let's say your DMs has become fashion's complaint desk. I love that. So wait, are you? And I would be remiss if I didn't mention. Do you remember the days? Maybe this is pre your time, but do you remember the days of Chic Happens from Hint Mag? Does that have any? Okay, so this was more my time. There was a publication. I remember Ben Whitcomb was one of the journalists, but there was another one. And the things that set themselves apart was that it was just very well written, but it was all of the industry chatter. It used to come out in a weekly digest with all the stories. Do the research on that. It was
I need to
called
look into that. Sounds fun.
Chic Happens, and the platform was on Hint Mag, and sort of a little fashion history here. Hint Mag, along with my publication JC Report, we were the start of the online publication back in the late '90s, the first online publication that reported on fashion, and they had a really controversial, really informative column that all of fashion consumes. So, where people speak truth to power, or, important gossip, let's say, there's a long tradition of this in fashion, and chic happens is not the only one. There's definitely much a history of this in fashion, and so your profile in this era, it definitely has resonance. However, we're living a very different time. So much more now is like co-opted, conglomeratized, and owned. It's harder seemingly to speak out, but not in your camp. Not in.
Well, no. Well, there was a while that I, I can say that I allowed myself to be bought by PRs and brands. I fully, can admit that. And I was very careful and very strategic with what I reported on, what I gossiped about, what I posted.
Okay.
You know, when I worked with Vogue France, I specifically remember there was like a situation with Pier Paolo Piccioli, and people were sort of, coming at him for not a lot of male body diversity on the runway. And then he said, "Oh, the next show I'm going to have body diversity, blah, 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 blah." And I was like, okay. And the next show came and went, and there was no body diversity. So I posted about it, like, Pier Paolo like lied, like, just like, remember, you said that you were going to have body diversity on your runway, and you didn't. I was leaving the Kenneth Ize show. Behind me was the then head of editorial content at Vogue France, Eugenie Trochu, and Edward Enifel, who just never liked me. And he nods at Eugenie to like talk to me, and she's like, "Okay." And she takes me aside, and we're walking, and she's telling me about how much she enjoys working with me, even though people ask her, "Why does she work with me?" That was so weird and random to say. But anyways, so she said, "I just wish that you would like make it easier for our work relationship." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she like goes on about like, posting about advertisers, this and that, Pier Paolo was not happy. And I'm just like, he wasn't happy with my personal Instagram story, like calling him out for not doing what he said. And she was like, "Yeah, da, 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 da." She's like, at Vogue, if we don't like something, we don't talk about it. I was like,
Uh,
oh, I was like, what have I gotten myself into? And I remember I called my agent that night, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't think I can do this. And I was trying to find a way of how do I unattach myself from this publication, because as much as like I enjoy like the prestige of working with them, it's giving me so much anxiety to be here because I'm constantly being made to feel like I um am just not worthy to be there, or I'm doing something wrong. And it was just a lot of anxiety.
But that statement, Lewis, isn't that a greater statement on the industry as a whole? If you take Vogue out and just put the industry, if you don't like something, don't say anything. Essentially, isn't that the cul-de-sac that we've essentially all ended
Yeah.
up in? I that
Yeah.
that that seems to be the overarching sentiment in fashion. Now, publicly, fashion speaks to a progressive identity. But the internal power structure tells a different story. Tell me the biggest disconnect between the image and the reality of of that profile.
I mean, the C-suites are all white. Like, like it's just what you see behind the scenes just doesn't match the sort of things that they, pretend they want to push, I guess.
Okay, that's been a constant. That's historical.
Yeah.
Nothing seems to be changing around that. But Lewis, one of the sort of conflicts I see is that the black and brown visibility is so strong in fashion when the parties are happening. Look at the Met Ball and in Paris when the content comes out. I mean, the black and brown people are over indexed in their influence and their style, like for all intents and purposes, with all the celebrities and the influencers that comes in and take up space and communicates this inclusivity and this wonderful assimilation, how is the public to think otherwise? Someone like myself who has been covering and understands and knows this industry for the last 25, 30 years, I know that's a complete myth. And I know that these personalities are communicating a very, very, very false messaging. However, their messaging will completely overshadow anything that someone like myself or yourself can say in their popularity and their influence. How are then we to scale that hurdle when there's so many examples of giddy agreeable black people communicating something entirely differently?
I mean, I guess for me, like I don't want to say that I don't deal with it, but I've realized that when you try to push, there is somebody that looks just like you, like pushing you two steps backwards.
Okay.
And I mean, the agreeable black person thing is, 100% true. And it's just like I don't have an answer for that, of what to do because I have no idea, and I don't, and it's not something that I think a lot about anymore. Just because I feel like I'm doing my own thing in my own lane. And I know that sounds really selfish, but I guess I've been here so long that I don't want to say I don't have any hope, but these things are always very cyclical.
But are you also speaking to being tired, to also
I think
being
I'm speaking to being jealous.
because while you're speaking, I was like, okay, dude, I know my, I know my history of activism. I know when I was willing to stand on that soapbox and say whatever the hell I want about something that I felt was, egregious. I had no problems with that. But I got to tell you, at this stage of my life, I'm tired and I'm less apt. I'm less apt to raise my hand and to go to the front of that line for that fight. Part of that has to do with those who are who I'm flanked by, or rather not flanked by. There is an exhaustion to holding that the flag of fight, to really being the one that leading the battlefield and owning the messaging and being contrarian and all those sort of things. It's exhausting. It's exhausting. I understand.
Because I've found throughout the years, and I don't want to say that these people benefited from me, but those people that, when it's trendy to be an activist, or when your activism or when your voice has tangible results, and those people that are like cheering for you, these are the same people that are going to be like out. And when, white people are talking ill of you, saying, he's disruptive or he's loud, these people will be agreeing.
100%. 100%.
Not all skin folk are kinfolk. I guess that's how I operate.
And that's there's truth in all of that. Absolutely. But in terms of your, say, public persona now, how do you reconcile your journalistic responsibilities with your profile as an influencer? Because they have different requirements, and
Wow.
one may supplant the other.
I guess, I switch back and forth from whatever is necessary for whatever job I'm doing.
Okay.
I've really started putting a lot of effort like into my Substack. Um, because we're in this moment where in order to succeed in journalism or as a writer, you need to be a personality, you need to be an influencer. And I've been doing that since day one. You know, all of the jobs that I got were not because I'm some like, prolific writer, or I went to some, grade school and got, a journalism degree. It was because people, and I don't want to say people like my personality, but because I had a personality which made my work more visible. I don't pretend it's anything otherwise.
Well, what I find also interesting is that you are committed to the written word in this age when the written word is so compromised and is almost thankless. I find it's interesting how you're leaning into a Substack and really using that as a platform for your storytelling. Why do you persist on that profile? Is that speaking to your journalism at heart situation?
No, I mean, not really. I would say, I mean, I don't want to be crass when I say it comes down to money, but um, jobs at magazines and at publications every day are getting cut left and right. Um, and I think it's really important for anybody in this industry to sort of have their own business, their own business model that they can rely on. And I would say that Substack provides that for me. And I don't have to deal with editors. I don't have to deal with people telling me, oh, you shouldn't write this or write that. I can speak directly to my followers, my subscribers.
The autonomy and freedom for sure. I think it is why that platform is so attractive right now for legacy journalists and editors who, to be fair, no longer have platforms to report from. Now, let's get into the industry and sort of the turbulence that's taking place right now surrounding luxury and all of that. Give me your take on what's going on with this volatility surrounding luxury, surrounding the reshuffling around creative directors, and you being in Paris and being on the front lines of a lot of that activity. What's your impression about this era right now in fashion?
I mean, everything's really volatile because, the world is very volatile and people aren't, spending money like they used to on things that they used to. And there's a lot more pressure on creative directors to deliver. And, the trial period in which they're supposed to succeed is smaller and smaller. But also the shuffling of creative directors. There's other things at play that don't really get reported on, which I think are exacerbated by the stress that's put on them. I mean, how honest and open are we being here? Like, are
Oh,
we?
this is called the Real Situation podcast for a reason. Please only
Okay,
give me the real
okay.
deal.
There are
Unfiltered.
there are a lot of these situations with creative directors in Paris that a lot of these houses are having to deal with a lot of addiction issues with some of these creative directors, which is why, you will have these creative directors just like suddenly out and nobody knows why they were doing such a good job. In Paris,
Right.
we know why. Like, and I think a lot of that, not a lot of that, but I think that there's not a lot of support systems for some of these designers and these conglomerates and these billionaires just want to, work them to the bone. So you have these people that are overworked, overstressed, and also overpaid, which, you know,
Well, Louis,
leads
you
to
just
a
please carry on, carry on.
which leads to a plethora of problems, and nobody wants to talk about them here. Everybody just wants to, like gloss over it, and I don't know. That's a big. It's like to me, that's a big story that nobody has reported on, and I'm just like, I don't know. It's very weird to me that nobody's reported on that because I feel like having a open conversation about that would really get things moving and how we can support these people in fashion.
Wow. Okay. News flash here. News flash. Louis, um,
I mean,
we've
okay.
these conversations have I've had these conversations behind the scenes for many, many, many years.
I
No
mean,
one speaks about these things. No one speaks about these things. I have to I have to consult my legal, but I'll mention something here. But from the days of a former Balmain designer to a former Celine designer, to a slew of other designers in fashion who has his issues. And this is not about a gossip detail. This is about what may have impact a designer's trajectory at a particular time in his or her history, or what may be impacting as a designer's output at the present time. These kind of information are kept covert. They're not exposed. They don't become a part of the narrative. Again, not to be gossiping, but as you said, there's not a support system for these designers. They exist in their silo. They're supposed to help these big brands look a certain way, and oftentimes at the expense of themselves and their personal health. And so a detail like that, I mean, you've opened a whole can of worms, and we would have to move this over to another conversation entirely in terms of like support and care for some of our most respected and important talents in this industry. You're 100% right. But those are the things that are not spoken about, Lois. Those are the things that are, I mean, they're spoken about in hushed tones behind the scenes. But yeah, those kind of things will continue to impact designers, and the public may never know about it, but because
but
it is not, huh?
the public eventually does know about them because if you look at like the Ricardo Tisci and Alexander Wang situation, those are two situations where it was drugs.
But were these things, these alleged indictments, interrogated and exposed in the way that, you know, other cases, a P. Diddy case, for example, a lot of that information is not out there. I feel like it, you know, we've scratched the surface of some of that information, and a lot of it has gone away. I don't know if there's any real retribution or any real justice in these cases. Please tell me a little bit more about it, because you've been following them so closely. Tell me about your impression about these cases and how they're viewed.
I mean, like in the legal documents that I've been reading from the Ricardo Tisci case, yeah, there was drugs at play allegedly that sort of created this situation. And of course, in the Alexander Wang situation, you know, he was allegedly drugging people, but you know, the situation around it was this image he had curated of himself as a party boy. And so I think that, you know, in the industry, people have access to everything. And when you have access to everything, you know, bad shit happens.
uh, that's usually the formula, right?
Yeah, I mean, when I first came to Paris and, you know, like my career was really taking off again in this big, like, influencer moment, and I was going out with all these creative directors, and it was just like the most unhealthy period of my life. And I was like seeing all sorts of things and just like next day being like, that was really weird and questionable, but nobody cared.
Right.
You know, it was just like, you know, we're just all having fun and partying and all of these things. So it is not shocking to me to hear about these situations these designers are getting themselves into, or you know, the Ricardo Tisci case, because these situations, these environments are just like a normal, like, I don't know, weekend in Paris.
I understand. And full disclosure, I have a long history with Ricardo Tisci, more in the past than certainly in the present. But I for the purposes of this podcast, I do want to have full disclosure about my relationships, because as I said, this is the Real Situation podcast for a reason. Now, to punctuate this, and we tapped
I
into
might
this
have
a
to
little.
switch. I might have to switch to my phone because my computer is about to die.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay, okay. I only
Let
have one
me.
more question, but I'll wait for you.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Okay, let's do
Okay.
it.
Now, what have you learned about how power actually works behind the scenes on this journey of yours?
What have I learned about how power works behind the scenes? I mean, that you really can't fight it.
Ooh, ooh,
No, I mean, like you,
ooh.
there are machines in place that you cannot beat, but what you can do is you can circumvent them.
hmm
You can achieve your goal by going around, but you're not going to be able to go over the top.
And I didn't have this question formatted, but I'm going to ask it. Your recent commentary on the Met Ball, speaking to what you just said, there was a fair amount of criticism on the power base, on the billionaires infiltrating fashion at the moment. Is that how are we to contend with that going forward? Is that something that's a foregone conclusion? Is your suggestion just to circumvent that? That cannot be stopped?
Yeah, we're not going to be able to stop if, Bezos wants to buy Vogue. We're not going to be able to stop it, and he's going to become a cultural force. But what we can do is we can make sure that we don't stop covering him uncritically, um, and that we create systems around it that support the people that, you know, I don't want to be like that he may harm, but by people that are affected by, decisions these billionaires make. Again, it's going back to creating support systems.
Mhm. And one more question. Has fashion criticism become more democratic, or have we just replaced one set of gatekeepers with another?
Oh, the latter, of course. Like fashion commentary at the moment is just like it's SpawnCon.
Is what now?
SpawnCon is just sponsored content. I mean, like
Oh.
I, I've been there, done that, and I can tell you that all of these people that you think, all of these, colored grids on your Instagram feed, like it's paid for. I know this because like the same people reach out to me or have reached out to me, to post something. It's yeah. I
Well,
think we're very much in the era of, go on Substack, find independent voices, or just do your own research because fashion commentary at this point is, pay to play.
Well, one of the reasons that I wanted to do this series, Look Who's Talking, Louis, is because I'm impressed with some of the pundits that I see right now on the Instagram, on the TikToks of the world. Like I find that their analysis is really deep and rich. I find their vocabulary to be inspiring. Some of them. I'm wondering, are there any of those? Are there any talents out there that you think is looking at this industry in an interesting way and that should be noted and should be supported?
I mean, I love Osama Shabi and how he looks at things through the lens of being somebody from the Middle East. Um, I love what my friend Lias does because it's just so like, funny and sharp and it's entertaining. Who else is out there? Like I'm really like spending most of my time on Substack now.
Have you been introduced to Jay Tibbetts? We had him on the
Oh, Jay
podcast.
is a friend. Yes, I love Jay. I
I
love, I,
find
I love the conversations that Jay is having around like luxury and class and all of that. So
love
yeah,
that.
Jay
Love.
100% is so good. I'm really happy that he's having his like moment.
Excellent. Well, Lois, thank you so much for taking the time. I feel that actually, this absolutely needed to happen, but I appreciate you just taking the time at this juncture to make it happen and for being so candid
Thank you
and
for
for
having
me.
me.
Say that again.
I'm glad we did this. Thank you for having me.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. And we're definitely going to rectify this meeting when I'm in Paris in the
Okay.
end of September. I look forward to meeting you, and I'm for sure I will have another conversation in the future because there's definitely more things for us to discuss. So
Looking forward
thank
to
you
it.
so much.
Thank you.